If you open a standard history textbook, it will tell you that our ancestors were primitive people who banged rocks together until civilization happened. But if you talk to a structural engineer, the story changes. Today, the strongest mobile crane on Earth, the Liebherr LTM, can barely lift 1,200 tons. It requires a team of computers and hydraulics to keep from tipping over. Yet thousands of years ago, primitive cultures were moving stones weighing 1,600 tons with zero machinery. No hydraulics, no steel cables, just ropes and determination. I don't think so. Today, we are putting physics on trial. Here are 12 ancient megaliths that modern engineers admit are mathematically impossible to lift. Let's get to it. Number 12, the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, Baalbek, Lebanon. In the dusty quarries of Baalbek, Lebanon, lies a limestone block that feels less like a monument and more like a glitch in the simulation. It's sticking out of the ground at a slight angle, almost as if the workers just went on a lunch break 2,000 years ago and decided never to come back. Local folklore says a pregnant woman could touch the stone and increase her fertility, which is a cute story, but it completely distracts you from the terrifying reality of what this object actually is. It is a single, solid piece of rock that was intended to be moved. Let's look at the physics, and I warn you, the math is offensive. This stone weighs an estimated 1,200 tons. Let me contextualize that. A Boeing 747 weighs about 180 tons. You would need to stack nearly 7 fully loaded jumbo jets to match the weight of this single block. Mainstream archaeologists insist the Romans moved stones like this using wooden rollers and oxen, but mechanical engineers point out a fatal flaw. The crushing weight of 1,200 tons would pulverize wooden rollers into sawdust instantly. The friction coefficient alone would require tens of thousands of men pulling at once, a workforce that physically cannot fit in the space provided. So, the builders left it there, perhaps realizing they had finally bitten off more than they could chew. But the terrifying part isn't that they failed to move this one, it's that they successfully moved stones almost as heavy just a few miles away. And while we're talking about moving impossible weights in impossible places, let's squeeze into a tunnel where physics goes to die. Number 11, the Western Stone, Jerusalem. Deep beneath the streets of Jerusalem, running along the base of the Temple Mount, there is a tunnel that feels like it's closing in on you. As you walk alongside the ancient retaining wall, the stones are impressive but standard. Then, suddenly, the masonry stops making sense. You reach a section of the wall that isn't made of bricks, but of a single, continuous block of limestone. It stretches on for 44 feet, the length of a bus, and disappears into the darkness above your head. You aren't looking at a wall, you're looking at a mountain that was shaved flat. This is the Western Stone, and it is a logistical nightmare. It weighs an estimated 570 tons. Now, 570 tons is lighter than our previous entry, but the context here makes it infinitely harder. This stone isn't in an open quarry, it is incorporated into a foundation surrounded by other structures. There is zero room for cranes, pulleys, or even a large team of men. The Archimedes principle of leverage requires a fulcrum and a long lever. In this confined space, there is nowhere to place a lever that would snap under the torque. To place this stone with such precision that you can't fit a razor blade between the joints requires a level of control that we struggle to achieve today with laser-guided machinery. Historians credit King Herod for this, claiming it was just brute force and manpower. But brute force doesn't explain how you maneuver a 570-ton block into a slot with millimeter precision without chipping the edges. It implies a technology or a technique that has totally been lost to time. But if you think moving them is hard, wait until you see how they scooped granite like it was vanilla ice cream.
Number 10. The Unfinished Obelisk, Aswan, Egypt. Lying horizontally in the bedrock of Aswan is a tragedy frozen in stone. It was supposed to be the greatest obelisk ever raised, a single spire of red granite standing 137 feet tall. But during the carving process, a massive fissure cracked the stone, rendering it useless. The workers abandoned it, leaving it attached to the bedrock. For us, this failure is a gift because it allows us to see the work in progress. And frankly, the work in progress looks less like chiseling and more like industrial manufacturing. Here is the smoking gun. The trench surrounding the obelisk is not flat. It has these strange, scalloped scoop marks, consistent and rhythmic. Mainstream Egyptologists tell us this was done with dolerite pounders, basically round rocks used to smash the granite until it turned to dust. Have you tried to smash granite with another rock? It takes hours to remove a few millimeters. To carve this 1,200-ton monstrosity with pounders would have taken decades of non-stop pounding. Yet the scoop marks are smooth, appearing almost as if a giant tool simply gouged out the rock. It looks exactly like the mark left by a modern backhoe bucket in soft clay, except this is Mohs scale 7 granite. The pounding theory falls apart when you look at the underside. How are they planning to detach the bottom? You can't fit a team of guys with rocks underneath a 1,200-ton block that hasn't been lifted yet. The geometry suggests a tool that could slice underneath the stone. But if you think Aswan is baffling, we need to go back to Lebanon, where the Romans supposedly built a temple on top of a foundation that shouldn't exist. Number 9. The Trilithons of Jupiter, Baalbek, Lebanon. We return to Baalbek, but this time we're looking at the Temple of Jupiter. It is a massive Roman structure, grandiose and arrogant. But the Romans were practically squatters here. If you look at the foundation the temple sits on, it is completely different from the Roman architecture above it. The base is constructed of 3 limestone blocks known as the Trilithons. These aren't just big, they are the largest building blocks ever used in construction on this planet. Each of these 3 stones weighs 800 tons, and unlike the stone left in the quarry, these were moved, lifted, and set into place 20 feet above the ground. Let me repeat that. They lifted 800 tons, the equivalent of 200 elephants, 20 feet into the air. Why? Why would any engineer choose the hardest possible way to build a foundation? Standard logic dictates using smaller blocks for the base and saving the big stuff for monuments. Whoever built this chose to use 800-ton blocks, implying that for them, moving 800 tons wasn't a problem. It suggests that weight was a trivial variable in their equation. The Romans wrote down everything, their wars, their laws, their wine recipes, yet they never once bragged about moving these stones. Why? Because they probably didn't do it. They just built their temple on top of the ruins of a civilization that was far superior to them. But if you want to see a monolith that looks less like a foundation and more like a crashed spaceship, we have to fly to Japan.
Number 8. The giant monoliths of Asuka Park, Japan. Deep in the forests of the Asuka region in Japan, you will find granite megaliths that look like they fell out of a sci-fi movie. The most famous is the Masuda no Iwafun, the rock ship of Masuda. It doesn't look like a temple or a shrine. It looks like a tank or a complex machine part. It sits alone near the top of a hill, a massive slab of granite weighing 800 tons, carved with bizarre square depressions and lattice-like patterns that serve no apparent religious function. The precision here is what keeps engineers awake at night. The lattice carvings are perfectly straight, and the surface is smoothed to a degree that requires high-velocity polishing tools. We are told this was done by Buddhist monks in the 7th century, but 7th century tools were iron and wood. You do not get laser-flat surfaces on granite using hand tools in the bamboo forest. Furthermore, there's no slag, no chips, and no record of construction. It's an oopart, an out-of-place artifact. It sits there, defying the landscape, looking like a component for a generator that's been missing for 10,000 years. We have no idea what it is. A star map? A tomb? A meaningless piece of art? The Japanese government rarely allows excavation nearby, deepening the mystery. But while the Japanese stones are mysterious because of their shape, our next entry is mysterious because of its microscopic precision, and the comment section is about to turn into a war zone. Number 7. The Serapeum boxes in Saqqara, Egypt. In 1850, Auguste Mariette used dynamite to blast open a sealed cavern at Saqqara. Inside, he found something that makes the pyramids look like child's play. He found the Serapeum, a subterranean hallway lined with alcoves. Inside each alcove sits a massive granite box. These aren't coffins, they are 100-ton precision-engineered containers made of rose granite and basalt, some of the hardest stones on Earth. Here is the tribal trigger for you. Mainstream historians state unequivocally that these boxes were sarcophagi for Apis bulls, sacred bulls worshipped as gods. They claim the boxes are empty because of looters. However, alternative researchers and engineers look at the boxes and see something else. The lids weigh 10 tons and fit so perfectly that the air is pumped out as it closes, creating a hermetic vacuum seal. The internal corners are machined to a perfect 90-degree angle, something impossible to achieve with handheld stone ponders in a cramped cave. The precision rivals modern optical equipment. So, which tribe are you in? Are these just fancy coffins for dead cows that were looted by ghosts, or does the 100-ton airtight granite construction suggest a technological function like waste containment or energy storage? Let me know in the comments if you're Team Bull or Team Power Plant, because whoever built these didn't just understand weight, they understood tolerances to the micron. Now, let's go from underground precision to a high-altitude nightmare.
Number 6. The Wall of the Six Monoliths, Ollantaytambo, Peru. High in the Andes Mountains lies Ollantaytambo, a fortress that stopped the Spanish conquistadors dead in their tracks. But the Spanish weren't just intimidated by the Incan warriors, they were baffled by the architecture. At the top of a steep agricultural terrace stands the Wall of the Six Monoliths. These are gigantic slabs of red porphyry weighing 50 tons each. While 50 tons sounds light compared to Baalbek, the logistics here are arguably more impossible. To get these stones to the site, the builders had to quarry them on the other side of the valley. They had to drag 50-ton stones down a steep mountain, drag them across a raging river at the bottom of the valley, and then, here's the kicker, drag them up a sheer cliff face to the fortress. Dragging a heavy object up a 70-degree incline requires more force than lifting it vertically, and dragging it across a riverbed, the physics of soil mechanics says a 50-ton concentrated load would sink immediately into the wet river mud, becoming immovable. The Incas had no wheels, no pulleys, no draft animals stronger than a llama. Yet, not only did they move them, but they also fitted them with thin stone shims between the blocks to absorb seismic activity. It is engineering genius that accounts for geology, physics, and logistics all at once. But across the ocean, the Greeks had their own explanation for walls like this. They simply blamed it on monsters. Number 5. The Cyclopean Walls of Tiryns, Greece. When the classical Greeks, the guys like Plato and Aristotle, looked at the ruins of Tiryns and Mycenae, they were terrified. They saw walls built with limestone boulders so massive that they refused to believe human hands touched them. They concluded that only the Cyclops, the one-eyed giants of mythology, could have lifted them. This is where we get the term Cyclopean masonry. These walls were ancient even to the ancient Greeks. The engineering anomaly here is the lack of mortar and the use of interlocking weight distribution. The stones at Tiryns are irregular, yet they are fitted together in a way that the weight of each stone locks the others in place. Some of these blocks weigh in excess of 15 tons, lifted high into the air to form archways and vaulted galleries. This was occurring during the Greek Dark Ages, a period where history tells us civilization had collapsed and people were forgetting how to read, yet apparently they remembered how to levitate limestone. It points to a lost chapter of human capability, a time before the classical era where technology was different, heavier, and far more ambitious. But if you want to see stones that defy not just gravity, but the very tools used to cut them, we have to travel to the most controversial site on Earth. Number 4. Puma Punku, Bolivia.
We are back in the Andes at an altitude of 13,000 feet, where the air is thin and the sun is brutal. This is Puma Punku. Unlike the rough organic boulders of Peru, the stones here look like they were printed in a factory. These are the famous H-blocks, intricate, geometric shapes made of andesite, an extremely hard volcanic rock. They look like giant Lego pieces designed to interlock with a modular system that suggests prefabrication. Here is your second tribal trigger. We have a serious problem with the tools. The drill holes in these stones are perfectly equidistant and smooth. Engineers who examine the cut marks say they show signs of high-speed rotary tools with diamond tips. The surface is perfectly flat. The mainstream tribe insists this was done with copper chisels, sand, and infinite patience. The alternative tribe argues that you cannot cut andesite with copper. It's like trying to cut a steak with a spoon. They suggest geopolymer molding, pouring the rock like concrete, or advanced machining. So, look at the drill holes. Look at the magnetic anomalies often found in these rocks. Is this the result of guys rubbing sand on rocks for 500 years? Or is this evidence of a CNC machine operating in 10,000 BC? Pick a side and fight it out below. Because while these blocks are small and precise, our next entry is just violently, stupidly big. Number 3. The Megaliths of Gornaya Shoria, Russia. Deep in the Siberian mountains, a team of researchers found something that shouldn't exist. These are the megaliths of Gornaya Shoria. We're talking about granite blocks stacked on top of each other that make the stones at Baalbek look like pebbles. Preliminary estimates, and I stress estimates because no one has brought a scale up there, suggest some of these blocks could weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 tons. Skeptics immediately jumped on this, claiming these are natural geological formations. They argue that the blocks are just cracked bedrock resulting from tectonic pressure, and that's a valid argument until you look at the seams. There are sections where the blocks are stacked with curved joints, and others where the separation is too clean, too horizontal to be random fractures. If this is nature, nature is playing a prank on us by imitating masonry. If these are artificial, it rewrites everything. Moving 4,000 tons requires energy sources we can't even conceptualize for ancient people. It pushes the timeline of civilization back into the realm of mythology. But speaking of mythology, there is a structure in Egypt that seems to predate the land itself.
Number 2. The Osirion, Abydos, Egypt. Behind the temple of Seti I in Abydos lies a pit. When archaeologists first dug here, they hit water. They thought they had found a simple well. But as they kept digging, they realized they weren't digging a well. They were uncovering a massive temple that had been buried by the geologic water table. This is the Osirion, and it looks absolutely nothing like the temple built next to it. The Temple of Seti is full of intricate carvings and small bricks. The Osirion is built of massive, unadorned granite pillars, weighing up to 100 tons each. It has no mortar. It has almost no inscriptions. The architectural style is identical to the Valley Temple by the Sphinx, severe, functional, and titanic. The fact that it sits below the water table suggests it was built when the water level was much lower, possibly thousands of years before the dynastic Egyptians arrived. It looks like a bunker. It looks like it was built to survive a cataclysm. The Egyptians called it the tomb of Osiris, the god of the dead, but it feels like a legacy left by a civilization that knew a flood was coming. But for our final entry, we have to visit the monument that proves human ambition has always been limitless and sometimes totally reckless. Number 1. The Yangshan Quarry stele, China. We end our journey in Nanjing, China. In the 1400s, the Yongle Emperor ordered a monument to be built for his father. He wanted the biggest stele in history, and his engineers took him literally. They went to the Yangshan Quarry and began carving. They cut the base, the body, and the head of the stele, and then they stopped. Why? Because they did the math a little too late. The base of the stele alone weighs 16,000 tons. The body weighs nearly 9,000. The head is another 6,000. The total weight of this monument, had it been assembled, would have been 31,000 tons. Let me be crystal clear.
The NASA Crawler Transporter, the massive treaded machine that carries rockets to the launch pad, has a load capacity of about 6,000 tons. Even if we could summon 5 NASA crawlers and strap them together, we could not move the base of this monument. The Chinese engineers, realizing they had carved a mountain they couldn't move, just left it attached to the bedrock. It remains there today, a 31,000-ton ghost. It is the ultimate proof of the ancient ambition. They weren't afraid of weight. They weren't limited by primitive minds. They were limited only by the laws of physics, laws they pushed to the absolute breaking point. So, we have 100-ton boxes that hold vacuums, 1,200-ton stones moved by magic, and 30,000-ton monuments that broke the hearts of emperors. If you enjoyed having your perception of history smashed to pieces, do me a favor. Click that subscribe button and hit the bell. It helps me pay for the aspirin I need after trying to understand how they moved the Trilithons. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.